This is a reply to Gumbly Boy, a video you just put up, and I think you called it Fireworks Night. I wanted to reply to that, and might say to my other people that view my videos that Gumbly Boy is the name of his channel. If you haven't seen some of his videos, you ought to check it out, because he's quite a guy. He's a bright British guy that tells some good stories, and we kind of follow each other's videos, and I've commented how many experiences we have alike. We're close to the same age, so I suppose that might explain it. But we've had several things in our lives that have been similar. Anyway, he was telling about Fireworks Night. He lives in the town of Gumley, and I love that name. I wish I lived in a town named Gumley, but that's a nice British name. And he was talking about when he was a kid, they had Fireworks Night when they could go out and shoot fireworks. And just wanted to say that here in the United States, we don't just have a fireworks night. Just about any time that anybody wants to shoot fireworks for any reason, there's ready supplies so they can do that. Of course, we always have them on 4th of July. Our Independence Day is a big fireworks night. Christmas is another, and of course New Year's Eve is another big one. But as I say, any time that you want to shoot fireworks in the U.S., especially here in the South, you can get a ready supply. Just up the road from where I live is a fireworks store, super center, I guess you would call it, that stays open. I think it's open 24 hours year-round. And this particular one is called Tennessee Alabama Fireworks, and the building is built between two interstates, I-24 that goes from Chattanooga to Nashville, and the interstate that goes to Birmingham. You got 10,000 lights on it, a big huge sign that's probably 15 feet high and 75 feet long that advertises the fireworks. And you can go in there any time and get fireworks, all the fireworks you want, and most of them at a very reasonable price. And I was amused at the description of the British fireworks and the bangers. I'd never heard bangers before, and from the description, I think what Gumbly Boy was saying was what we call firecrackers. He described two different sizes of bangers, and here also we have small firecrackers, and then we have some big bangers, which are called M80s and cherry bombs. The cherry bomb was round, red, looked like a big cherry, about the size of a quarter, green, waterproof green fuse in it. And they're illegal now. You can't buy them, or not the old type anymore. There's some small ones still called that, but those things were terrifically powerful. I guess it's the reason they were outlawed. Some people had hands split open and lost fingers. And there was one that was even worse than that, called an M80, and it was a cylindrical. And the fuse was on the side of the cylinder, about halfway down. Again, a waterproof fuse. And you could take those things and light them, and it would just blow a tin can all to pieces. Or you could take them and throw them in a creek in the lake, and it would still burn because of the fuse and explode underwater. I'm sure there'd been a few fish and turtles disturbed by those M80s over time. So we had bangers also, just bigger and I guess meaner. But hearing about the fireworks reminded me of some things we did as country boys living in the South when we were growing up. In those days, you didn't have access to fireworks like you do nowadays, but we did have access to shotgun shells. There was a lot of hunting, and there's always shotgun shells laying around in drawers and different places in the house. And this is one of those stories that I need to put a disclaimer on, and the disclaimer and warning is don't go out and do this. We did it and got by with it, and we're lucky, but it would be a dangerous thing to do. And what we would do, I don't know where we learned it. I learned it from my older brother. I guess he learned it from my older cousin. And we would find shotgun shells, 10 gauge, whatever gauge, 16 gauge, 14 gauge, whatever we could find. And we would get a knife out of the kitchen, and we would take that knife and cut around that shotgun shell casing. Now this was gunpowder inside and pellets, holding it in our hands with a knife. Cut that thing apart and take out the pellets and the wadding and the gunpowder. I don't know if it was black powder, but it's gunpowder anyway. We would take that out of those shotgun shells and set the powder aside and set the pellets aside. And somebody had found out that you could take an old bicycle wheel and take a spoke out of that wheel, which was a wire, And on the end of that wire is a fitting that ties it into the rim. And that fitting on the end had, for threading it onto the spoke, was hollow. And we found that you could take that bicycle spoke out with that fitting and that wire, and we would bend the end of the wire about the shape of a handle, and we would make a bicycle spoke pistol or gun out of that. And we found and learned from somebody you could take powder and poke down in that cylinder on that fitting, and one of those pellets out of a shotgun shell would just fit in the end of that fitting. We'd put the powder in, pack it in real tight, and then put in the pellet and hold it up like a gun and take a kitchen match and hold under it till it heated that powder to combustion point, and it would pop and shoot that pellet somewhere. No barrel. It didn't have any accuracy, but it would. We really thought that was a lot of fun, and we had done that when I was a kid hundreds of times. Never got hurt doing it, but it was so dangerous. So just one black powder or gunpowder just flashes and with just a spark, but we never got hurt doing it. But we used the powder up, and we also found out you could take those same kitchen matches we used to heat the thing and crumble up the head. I guess it was the sulfur, the phosphorus on the end of them, and pack down in that same little barrel on that bicycle spoke pistol. Put a pellet in it, heat it up, and it'd also pop and send the pellet just flying. Not as readily as the gunpowder, but that phosphorus, I suppose that was phosphorus. In my memory, that's what it was, what we called it anyway, would explode that thing and send it flying. And another thing we did, I don't know how widely spread this was, but it's dangerous too. In those days, a lot of people used, due to lack of having electricity and flashlights and everything, they had carbide lights. The hunters used them, and I guess miners used them, but they had carbide lights that they wore on their heads, on their hats, for light at night. And these things contain granular carbide, and they had a little water container, and they would put the water on the carbide, and it would get a reaction, and it would spew out. It turns out to be acetylene gas, which is very explosive. It's used like in cutting torches and things like that. Burns and will explode. Anyway, they lit the little light on their headband, their cap, and that had a little reflector, and that would provide them light out at night. So this carbide was around. I can still remember the smell of carbide. If you've never smelled it, it had a very distinct smell. But people kept cans of this stuff sitting around. It was okay as long as it was dry. No problem as long as it was dry. When it became wet, it's when there was a problem. But here again, somebody showed my brother how to do this, and he taught me how to do it. And when we wanted an explosion, the Southern boys and explosions and fireworks and things blowing up go together. So every so often we would decide to make an explosion. And we would take a Hershey's cocoa can. I don't know if they still make them like we had or not, but at that time they were oddly shaped, made out of metal, and it had a large lid, a metal lid on top that pressed down into that can. It would seal it. So we would find when Mother used up all the cocoa, we always saved the cocoa cans. And these things were maybe 6 or 8 inches high and 4 inches across, maybe 2 or 3 inches thick. And somehow we learned you could take that cocoa can and poke a hole in the back of it, in the bottom of it. That was the only change you made to it. We would put, and we knew how many grains to put in to hold the explosion to the right level. And we would put in several grains of carbide inside that cocoa can and put a little water in it to get the reaction going, and tap the lid, the metal lid on front of that thing. We'd sit it on the ground and put our foot on it. And by that time, the water had reacted with the carbide, and there was acetylene gas spewing out that hole in the back. You could hear it bubbling in there. It was reacting. It was acting. And we knew the timing, and we would take a kitchen match and reach down under the can under our foot and light those fumes coming out of the back of that can, and it just put off a terrific explosion. If you put too much, sometimes it would destroy the can, and it would sometimes hurt your foot. And it would send the cap on that can just going across the yard. And there again, we did that a bunch of times and never got hurt. We were lucky. We were protected in some way. So I wanted to add that to your story, that in the South we had fireworks a whole lot, and some of them were self-made. Goodbye.